Please be seated. I open this public session of the Doctoral Examination Committee of the Faculty of Social Sciences with this votum. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Prior to the examination, I would like to invite the candidate to give a brief explanation of the research on which her thesis is based. The floor is yours, 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Honorable Rector, members of the reading committee, my promoter and co-promoter, and dear colleagues, friends, and family. Today, I'm going to take you to Chittagong borderland in South Asia, present what I have learned from the people living there by asking a particular research question. How do people with different ethnic identities and positions of power connect and disconnect in their venture to share political space? Let me begin with introducing the Chittagong Hills. The hills constitute the southeastern borderland of Bangladesh, a nation state in South Asia that came into being in 1971. The hills connect the country with Northeast India and Myanmar. Traditionally, the hills is the homeland of 12 distinct ethnic groups. Since its emergence, however, Bangladesh considered the hills and its indigenous population as threats to national integrity. Based on that assessment, the state initiated and implemented a large-scale military deployment along with a huge population relocation program involving the migration of Bengali Muslims into the hills. Bengali Muslims are the dominant ethnic and religious community of Bangladesh. My dissertation is about the tensed relations between the immigrant national majority, that is Bengalis, and indigenous ethnic minorities in the Chittagong Hills. Now let me zoom out a little bit from the national territory and introduce the hills as a small part of Zomia. Zomia is the name of a large region of Asia introduced by Dutch social scientist Willem van Schendel. Physically, Zomia spreads some 1,000 kilometers from the South China Sea to the Himalayas. For some scholars, the space is known as the Asian Highlands or as the Southeast Asian Massif. Van Schendel introduces the idea of Zomia to challenge the conventional way of imagination of areas and the practice of area studies that creates peripheralization of certain geographies and knowledge. In my research, I'm inspired by Van Schendel and conceptualized the Chittagong Hills as part of Zomia and not as a mere periphery of Bangladesh. By conceptualizing the hills as part of Zomia, provides us an opportunity to understand the indigenous peoples of the hills and their social, cultural, and political connections and organizations in a different way that Bangladesh state-centric knowledge has imagined. For example, Bangladesh imagined that it is a land of one nation, Bengalis, who speak the Bengali language and practice mainly the religion of Islam. The indigenous peoples of the hills and other non-Bengali, non-Muslim inhabitants of the country, on the other hand, are fixed, primitive, uncivilized, inferior to the Bengali Muslims and second-class citizens. As a result, the local ethnic and religious minorities of the hills and whole Bangladesh for that matter are considered disposable. Available historical evidence and ethnographic knowledge about Bangladesh, particularly about the Chittagong Hills, where most of the ethnic minorities of Bangladesh reside, depict that despite deep-seated experience of living in the lowlands of Bangladesh, the indigenous peoples of the hills clearly demonstrate historical, cultural, and linguistic links with highlanders living just across the border. My research discovered that Bangladesh clearly demonstrates myriad traits of connectivity between the de facto lowlanders and de facto highlanders. De facto highlanders is the new term that I, along with my supervisor Alan Ball, introduced in my dissertation to address the indigenous peoples of the hills in relation to the Bengalis, to highlight their historical connection to highland Asia in relation to the de facto lowlanders who are historically connected with lowland Bengal. Throughout my dissertation, I suggested that Bangladesh should be viewed as a constituent part of border zone where the mainland South Asia and Asian highlands meet and interconnect. Scientifically, it is helpful because it allows researchers to go beyond the existing normative discourses about Bangladesh and its relation to highland Asia across the border. In my ethnographic research, I have emphasized on Bengali migrants and conducted my 1-year-long ethnographic fieldwork mainly in a settler village in the hills. This choice is made based on the literature review that clearly show a gap in understanding what is the social, economic, and political background of the migrants who are part of the national majority population that migrate to majority populated borderland, a minority populated borderland. What strategies have the migrant taken to grapple with the unfamiliar places, people, and situation after they arrive there under the conditions of being subjugated to military directions, allegedly to protect them? How do diverse politics of labeling in the region intersect and shape the migration and settlement processes and practice perceptions thereof? How are recent developments pretending to pacify the conflictive and violent situation of the region in reality impacting the immigrants' perceptions of security and insecurity and the way they respond to this? My research reveals that the de facto lowlanders in the hills, largely neglected by other researchers, are indeed part of the marginal and mobile peasantry of Deltaic Bengal. Their lives and livelihoods are deeply impacted by the border-making processes in the region since the 1940s. They were seriously involved in the border regional dynamics. This means that the contrasting concepts of mobility and immobility cannot be separated from each other. In my research, I have expanded this idea and show that when marginal Bengali Muslims were escaping their immobilities in India, resulting from evicting the non-Hindu minorities from Indian territory, they were obviously uncertain about the kind of situation that would await them in East Pakistan, the previous name of Bangladesh. They were refugees, yet officially remained unrecognized as such in their new homeland of Bangladesh. They ended up being caught up in a predicament. They were land evicted people in the old and thieves in their new country. They sometimes acknowledged the process as illegal that they have settled in the hills, but were simultaneously shielded by their new rulers and armed forces. The process will indicate the new ethnic, religious, political power growing out of new demographic balance in the CHT, now majority Bengali Muslim, did not result in genuine upward mobility of these Bengali Muslim peasants. So what I have learned that these two concepts cannot be understood as binary and opposite concepts. And these Bengalis also share the regimes of immobility and mobility like their neighbors, the indigenous minorities. However, trying to grapple with the unfamiliar places, people, and situation in the hills, my findings suggest that migrant Bengali Muslims often found resonance for their sufferings and insecurity in declaring themselves as Bengalis, as Bengali Muslim, who are considered as more entitled to hills lands, and the natives who are neither Muslim or Bengalis. Bengaliness and Bengali Muslimness define the two most essential characteristics of the new homeland and of these migrants. The military backing of their land encroachment supported such usurping actions. Thus, I show that the new Bengalis excluded the indigenous minorities from their imagination of the entitled public, the citizenry, the most important bearers, and thus ingredient of democracy. In sum, I have argued that violence and democracy constitute two sides of the same coin. My research reveals that in the context of the hills and Bangladesh, the Bengali Muslims view democracy and citizenship not as ideas of encompassing all inhabitants of the country. And what I have also seen that people actually are the co-creator of this idea of state citizenship and also the border militarization. And here I actually understood that border militarization is not only about a large scale of military deployment, but also how people look at other as a threat and insecurity to themselves. So this idea of self and other was very strong in the Chittagong Hills.
Would you please, Will, finish? Yeah.
1 minute.
1 minute? That's okay. 1 minute.
Another complex feature of the complex situation in the CHD is that amidst the history and present situation of violence and conflict, interethnic marriage relations between the members of Bengali Muslim immigrants and the ethnic minority communities are not rare. This dissertation particularly have investigated 21 cases of such marriages to understand identity politics around ethnicity and the way that politics intersect with other structure of labeling and power struggle from the ordinary people's perceptions and day-to-day lived realities. This observation demonstrates that interethnic marriages result in neither assimilation nor abandonment of the idea of belonging to a particular collective boundedness. Rather, they depict the capacity of individuals to navigate diverse hostile political situations and to negotiate and secure membership within the constellation of different collective boundedness. Overall, in my research, I have argued that state make categories and labels and boundaries and borders with the intention to govern its populations and territories. Peoples make use of those limits, classifications and identities, sometimes even by breaking and remaking them to ensure their survival and smooth living.
Thank you. May I invite the supervisors and the committee members to take your place behind the table. May I hear from the candidate that you were prepared to defend your thesis?
Rector, on your authority and as authorized by the College of Deans and in accordance with the Doctoral Examination Committee in the Faculty of Social Science, I am prepared to defend my thesis entitled Conflict and Coexistence in the Southeastern Bengal Borderland, Reflections on Migration Boundaries, Connectivity and Disconnection in Bangladesh, in order to obtain the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, dear candidate. Well, dear audience, we have a ceremony with opponents here in person, but also 2 or 3 opponents on Zoom. And it's our procedure to invite our colleagues, external colleagues, to start the opponents. So first of all, I would like all to thank you to attend this ceremony, also to the audience. And I would like to invite Professor Gerhards. She is Professor of Sociology of the University of Fulda to start the one.
Okay, thank you. So on behalf, on the authority of the rector and by virtue of my right, I would like to thank you for providing such a consistent and precise summary of your work. I very much enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed reading your thesis. In my opinion, you have made a really new and innovative contribution to the research on the Chittagong Hill Tracts, even though I do not agree with the statement that since independence of Bangladesh, no ethnographic studies has been done, as I read. I agree that the focus on the social relations between the indigenous populations and the Bengali settlers who have come to the hills only after independence offers new perspectives, which you have successfully explored. In particular, your research reveals how local society has been transforming under the conditions set by the nation-building project, as it has been pursued by political elites in different ways, and how social change has been instigated at the local level through changing figurations unfolding between the different actors. And what I find most fascinating is the fact that with your research, you are overcoming the polarizations which are characterizing not just the translocal political arena, but also the academic field of CHT studies. In that sense, your research really helps to open up new perspectives. While I'm convinced that you have entered new ground, I was a bit astonished reading that you decided to use the notion of ethnic minority to denote the indigenous population in your analysis. I'm raising this because, having followed the discourse on the rights of indigenous people in Bangladesh, I think the notion is highly problematic for two reasons. One reason, of course, is that it has been adopted by those promoting the assimilation of indigenous groups into the mainstream society. Another reason, which according to my view is more relevant and also more interesting, is the fact that the minorities are always being defined in relation to majorities. If we acknowledge the significance of minority-majority relations, we also need to reflect on the frame of reference into which these are built. Therefore, my first question would be if the reproduction of the minority-majority rhetoric, as it's been applied by the Bangladeshi government, actually contributes to the manifestation of nationalist discourses at the political level, as well as to the much criticized methodological nationalism.
Thank you, learned opponent, for your question. If I have understood your question correctly, that you have pointed out that in my dissertation I have chosen to use ethnic minority and also indigenous people, all the designations that are in use when discussing Chittagong Hills issues. Yes, how I actually have overcome the idea of national methodological nationalism by using all these terms and notions. Well, I think when I was doing this research, there is a very strong movement of indigeneity in Bangladesh and Chittagong Hill Tracts, and also in other parts of the country. But I think what I have learned from this research, that emphasizing on indigeneity is actually emphasizing the division and the boundaries that is already there and creating the problems. And there is a necessity of looking at the things in a different way. And that is why I think the idea of de facto highlanders that we have used for ethnic minorities or indigenous people in the Chittagong Hills, the designation that are usually used, that to look at the people, that they are actually not fixed and they have connection with historical process of state making, border making, and nation making, and these are very important. That's why these terms are not taken for granted. Rather, in my research, what I have found out that this notion should be challenged and this connection should be in more focus.
Is the answer sufficient, or do you have to add?
Well, I think it answers part of the question, and I understand, or what I understand from your response now is that you are particularly highlighting the relationality of the different populations. Mm-hmm. At the same time, minority-majority relations, I mean, if we look at these notions in the context of nation building, It also has to do with unequal, I mean, with rights and with access to rights, which is quite often, most cases, very unequal. I mean, this is also why many nation states adopt policies, minority protection, affirmative politics, preferential politics, and so on, because there is a tendency that minorities are being disadvantaged. Well, the Bangladeshi government, as far as I understand, has adopted an approach which kind of enforces the assimilation of the minorities being promoted into members of the mainstream society. So there is an inequality, which is very apparent in the history of the nationalist discourse. And that's where I would like to relate see my question be related to.
Okay, well, there's a lot of food for further discussion, I think. Thank you, colleague from Germany, Professor Gerhards. Now we continue to invite Professor Naher from the Jahangir University from Bangladesh to have the opportunity to start the discussion. The floor is yours. And a warm welcome to you and thanks for attendance at this ceremony.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Nasrin Siraj Annie. I'm so happy to see you there. Your long journey is going to be end today, so I'm very happy. You have done an excellent work. I really enjoyed reading your thesis, and I think that we already had lots of discussion on your thesis. You have brought so many concepts, perspectives, theoretical debates, and also raised different types of questions in a single thesis. I think that which was definitely challenging for you. However, to me, you have managed it with strong arguments in every chapters and at the end of your thesis. So I think that your thesis will have great contribution in our academia because there are lots of debates going on Chittagong Hillworks issue and also on indigenous people in Bangladesh. So congratulations again. I have two straightforward questions to Nasrin. I think that Eva has already done partially she has already covered that, but still I have two questions. You talked about national majority, basically the Bengali Muslim in general. We know that there were many Bengalis living in the Chittagong Hillworks even before the state-sponsored migration that started in the 70s. I was just wondering, what's the intersection relationships between, I just want to know much, about the intersection relationships between Bengali, the migrated in different phases and with the other ethnic minority, as you mentioned them as ethnic minority people, and also with different political, the factions in Chittagong Hillworks. So this is my first question. And the second question that is related to Eva, that there is a broad consensus about the indigenous people among the academia. In your dissertation, I think that you carefully used the term ethnic minority. I mean, especially particularly to place them in opposition to Bengali majority, or what you said, national majority, instead of indigenous people. Could you please tell me more about why you have avoided the term indigenous people? Don't you think that is it another way to, way to othering them by, even though you wanted to avoid them saying that othering, because you have argued that this term, always make them other. But don't you think when you use this word as well, like the ethnic minority, that this is also, somehow othering them? Thank you.
Thank you, learned opponent. If I understood you correctly, the first question is about the diversity in Bengali community and diversity in indigenous community and how they are intersecting this situation of this particularly Bengalis, or whether this intersectionality is reflected in my research. In my research, actually, I strongly criticize the categorization that like when we talk about this Bengali community or ethnic minority community, they are not homogeneous community. The Bengali migrants are very diversified on the basis of when they have come, from where they have come, and where they're living, and how long they are living, what connection they have with indigenous people, or with army, or with state, even their religion and locality. So many things are actually have played a role, and in one of my chapter, it is actually addressed very explicit way, and where I have actually showed that because of the border making, these are the marginal peasants or mobile peasants who have been actually on the move for a long time. But because the border was not present, so it was not a big issue. But when this border started to take shape, it didn't actually only, so it is a continuous process that has been going on. So the particular research community, or the Bengali migrants who came through the settlement program, on which community I have focused, I have learned that they have actually been moving for a long time, but during this India and Pakistan war in 1960s, it was very clear that this porous border is getting more stronger, even physically or in the mind of the people. And also in 1971, when Bangladesh became an independent country, this border has become more strong. So, so this is the what should I say? The main focus of the discussion or the answers that I have got, and when now how they are living, when I looked at it, I saw that there are very few, 5 actually I have found in where I have worked, that they are the old Bengalis who have not come by this state-sponsored program. And they are more powerful, they have more connection with the army, they have more business, they have more entrepreneurship, and the settlers are actually confined in villages where they cannot actually go out or look for a job, and they actually did not have any other job except serving the military. So these sort of realities are what I have found, and that I have also written about. And I actually, to answer your second question, I actually do not agree that I haven't used the term indigenous people, but I use all the available terms that are in use. But particularly, I wanted to challenge or question the idea of indigeneity. Of course, it is there. And in one of my chapters, I have also depicted that the Bengali migrants are also claiming that they are more indigenous in Bangladesh and in Chittagong Hill Tracts, because they have been living there for almost now 4 generations. So this is a kind of struggle, or the idea that the people are actually playing with to claim their right in Chittagong Hill Tracts or in Bangladesh. So it is not to say that they are not indigenous, or this is actually a very debated issue theoretically and also in the field, that these categories are not natural, they are made up, and people make use of these categories to claim more rights and make their life more livable.
Unfortunately, Professor Naher, dear candidate, I have to intervene because we started a little bit later. So I will give all the colleagues the opportunity to discuss your thesis. Thank you very much from Amsterdam to Bangladesh. Thank you for your very interesting questions, and thank you, candidate. Well, I would like to continue now to give the floor to Dr. Erik de Maker. He is Associate Professor of the University of Leiden. A warm welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. On the authority of the rector and by virtue of my right, I would like to comment on the PhD written, which we're talking about now. Dear Nasrin Siraj, your PhD thesis focuses on the Chittagong Hill Tracts, providing a historical and anthropological analysis of the societal categories within which people locate themselves, and how these categories have been co-produced by the specific political conditions of the CHT, and how these have a bearing on notions of citizenship and the ways in which people relate to the state. First, let me congratulate with a thesis that is well written and very informative. It is clear from the thesis that you have done extensive ethnographic research, engaging with a broad variety of people under often challenging conditions. CHD, for many of us, I should speak for myself, notably has a reputation as a worst case scenario. I mean, it's a region where I've never been, but a region whose inhabitants became marginalized minorities in a modern state, first East Pakistan, then Bangladesh, whose land was subsequently taken away and whose rights were violated due to government-induced settlement policies that encouraged large numbers of migrants from the country's ethnic majority to migrate to the region. In your thesis, you try to refine and also in certain respects overcome this common, rather dichotomous perspective. Notably, you focus on the position of the migrants and try to show how these do not constitute a homogeneous group, but are differentiated along lines of class, relationships to the state, and last but certainly not least, the time of arrival in the CHT. I now come to my question. Actually, I have three, but I'll just stick to one. And actually, I wanted to ask you a question about CHT and its position as a borderland, but because the previous question has already, you actually covered that, I'm skipping to my second question. That is a question of historical nature. You mentioned that the state entered CHT in 1860, but that seems to refer to the colonial state. So what were the political and administrative configurations prior to this conquest? How will people residing in what later became the CHT subject to paying taxes, military service, and included in networks of trade? And how were these prior arrangements redefined with the adoption of the region in the colonial state? These questions are all the more relevant since you write on page 105 that unlike the rest of Bangladesh, the state of Bangladesh in the hills continues with some historical regional provisions and administrative arrangements that originated in the British colonial period. One such is a degree of indirect rule by chiefs and rajas of the three tribal circles. Another is a local system of taxation and land rights. And the third are particular forms of representation, such as a regional council. These arrangements are also important to the 1997 ceasefire agreement. You write, the peace accord officially recognized the hills as a tribal inhabited region and consequently recognized the authority of the three tribal chiefs. It also prioritized the tribal communities in electing the members, the chairman, and the chief executive office of the regional council. Can you say a bit more about these prior political and administrative arrangements and in what respects these continue to be of relevance in the present?
Thank you, dear opponent, learned opponent. So you are right that there have been, before the colonial period, the way the other administrators had administered Chittagong Hill Tracts, it has actually transformed their own way of organization and the hierarchy also. And what I wanted to say that how this has continuing at the present session after passing all these processes, going through modern state making via British colonial period, and then Pakistan period and Bangladesh period. And after accepting some of the previous administrative units are still continuing. What I have seen that at present, so it is a pity that there is a emphasis in the popular discourse on indigeneity, because Bangladesh state is also not accepting that indigenous people accept. So non-Bengali and non-Muslim people exist, or this particularly the term that they are indigenous people, not that they are native, but they have certain rights according to the many UN declaration. So what I have seen that in the popular discourse actually, or discussion, it is missed that Bangladesh actually have accepted certain level of autonomy and certain level of parallel sovereignty in the Chittagong hill tracts. So that is continuing, but it is not addressed in academic writing or popular writing. So it is always about as if ensuring the indigeneity will ensure the accessibility or rights of the Chittagong hill tracts. So this is what I would say, that it is continuing, but it is not getting attention properly, I would say. I think being in Bangladeshi and being working there, and also work for justice. So I think this should be emphasized in the popular discourse or in the academia. But I have also talked with the queen of the Chakma circle, and what I have learned from her, that there is a ignorance, of course, that the protocols they were supposed to get from the state after the peace accord, that is also ignored. And sometimes we have heard from the newspaper that the queen is also attacked by the army. So these are also going on, if I want to emphasize on this present situation.
Thank you.
Is it sufficient for you,
Yes.
colleague? Thank you. And so now we again continue to invite colleague Professor Nasrin Siraj from Bangladesh, Chittagong University in Bangladesh, to have the opportunity for the discussion with the candidate. So for you, very welcome, and thanks for your willingness to participate in this ceremony. Thank you.
On the authority of Honorable Rector and by the virtue of my right, let me congratulate you, Nasrin Siraj, for the first time. Really, you have. I congratulate you from my core of heart, and it's nice to see you in front of a lot of learned colleagues. So I have a very couple of comments on your dissertation. I have read this dissertation very carefully, and I take interest in kind of study on Bengali satires. You have claimed in your dissertation what my colleague, Professor Geraj, already mentioned, that no ethnography research has been done since Bangladesh independence. I think it could be applicable for no ethnography research has been done on Bengali satire, because a couple of very good ethnography research have been done by the time. So I would say, and the way you have structured your dissertation, I'm really impressed, and it's really well articulated. And I would appreciate the empirical data, the way you contextualized and actually analyzed your empirical data within the theoretical framework is really appreciable. And I'm also impressed with the literature review. You have extensively reviewed almost all the available literature on while waiting on the Chittagong hill tracts. And also the way you actually I started with your dissertation from chapter 1, 2, 3. That's really good enough to have wonderful foundation for what actually you claim in your dissertation. Basically, the transforming relationship between indigenous community and Bengali settlers, what you claim Bengali Muslims, immigrants, Bengali Muslim migrants. So there are kind of conceptual ambiguity I found in your dissertation all through from first to last. Like I would expect you to respond to this points, because it's like intercultural encounter and cross-cultural encounter. What's the difference between intercultural encounter and cross-cultural encounter? In the beginning, when you set up your objectives of dissertations, you wrote a common one and you segmented, you divided in your central focus into a couple of questions, like how do diverse politics of labeling in the region intersect and shape the migration and settlement process and perception thereof? What do you mean by diverse politics of labeling? And is it applicable for indigenous communities who are known like Pahari, Adivasi, Khutroni, Gushti, and tribal? There are a lot of Jumma, a lot of labeling. But what about the Bengali settlers? I would be happy to know about it. And also you cited the demographic informations like 2011. There are 12 distinct tribal groups, and you wrote Mru and Muru. Actually, Mru and Mru, so far I know that the same community. And in 1991, the last demographic census Bangladesh government state made, in that category, they also wrote the same and they corrected it later. But in your dissertation, what you have written in 2022, you cited the reference of 2011, and he wrote that Mru and Mrung are different ethnic groups, different indigenous groups. So I would be happy to know about it. And I have two questions specific. One is on your methodology. You have wonderfully positioned yourself that you are Bengali Muslim middle class women based on the country capital Dhaka. That's wonderful, contextualization, and you have clarified your positions. But I'm interested to know, why have you taken your position like a trickster and professional stranger? Darcio Graciani's idea, what you have taken and how you were benefited by using this kind of positionality. That's one point. That's one question I want to know. And the second one, in your theoretical discussions, you wrote about the cultural diversity, encounter, and coexistence. And I was actually interested to know, because your title is Conflict and Coexistence in the Southeastern Bengal Borderlands. I was actually interested to know more about conflict, how you conceptualize, theorize conflict, because in one of the leading variable of your dissertation. So why is conflict missing? That's I'm interested to know. And how do you actually conceptualize and theorize in your dissertation to understand conflict and coexistence? Thank you so much.
Thank you, learned opponent. To address your first question, methodologically, why I position myself or concluded myself as trickster. I think this is also I have written and explained in the dissertation. And to answer your question, it is actually what we anthropologists do usually in the field. I think that we make friends, we gain trust, but this is also, I always reflect that, is it possible to gain trust or being friends? It is difficult. Do I know myself better? How do I know others? So, but we have specific question, and we go there and try to find answers. And there is actually saying about anthropology that we always side with our research community. But we also, like in this case, I have been working with a community who I want also to be distanced, because the process which brought them in the hills, it is problematic, and I seek justice against and protest those kind of processes, or I want to yeah, so that is why it is that I am becoming friends who are actually known as the perpetrator, who are involved in grabbing lands of the indigenous minorities in the hills. and who are actually in my different chapters. I have said that, written that they are in their day-to-day discourses and discussions, they are these Bengali settlers are actually denying the citizenship of the indigenous people, saying racist remarks that they have come from outside, or they don't have proper language, they don't know how to clothe and how to cook. So all these things. So I have been actually listening to all this to these interviews or discussion from my interlocutors, but at the same time I wanted to keep that distance and analyze that how actually they have come to this belief or perception about the indigenous people or where they have come. So that's why I said that I borrowed this idea that anthropologists are always strangers or trickster, that we try to become friends, but at the same time we are professional strangers and rely on our analysis. To address your second question, I would say that how I think I have conceptualized the conflict in a different way. For example, so in my research, actually, I have realized from the beginning that it is very difficult to separate conflict and conviviality, because people at the same time hate each other, but at the same time they are living together, finding some ways to live together. So it has been there, but it was very entangled. It was going simultaneously. So in all my chapters, I tried to address that the conflict and living together, coexistence actually goes simultaneously. And when I say, like, for example, in the we are the true citizens of this country, it is about citizenry. It is about who belongs where. So that conflict was emphasized. But at the same time, people are living together. So it is a difficult issue in my research that
I have
had
to
address
intervene
both.
again. I apologize for that, but we have a time limit. I apologize, really. And but because our two other opponents who would like to have the opportunity to discuss with the candidate. Well, thank you very much, Professor Udin, for your contribution. So I would like to go quickly, to continue quickly, and to invite Associate Professor Dr. Wouters from the Royal Thimphu College from Bhutan. The floor is yours, and a warm welcome to you. You have 5 minutes. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. On the authority of the rector and by virtue of my right, I would like to thank Nasrin Siraj for this thesis, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading. And especially a focus on immigrant settlers is counterintuitive and therefore enriching in the light of existing scholarship. I had a small summary, but I think I will save that in the interest of time. And I would like to ask the candidate to reflect on what her research may offer to the unfolding kind of 21st century in Highland Asia. So I would like to ask her to briefly reflect beyond the Chittagong Hill Tracts and what her findings on state, society, sociality, development, identity, ethnicity, indigeneity may tell us beyond the boundaries of Bangladesh. That is question one. And question two is that the candidate focused on state-induced migration. What we see in Northeast India, what we see in the uplands of Burma and neighboring regions, is that the migration of lowlanders to the highlanders is often following the trail of capital. What is the role of capitalism in the past, but certainly in the present and in the unfolding future, in the migration trajectories in Bangladesh? Thank you.
Thank you, learned opponent. Beyond Bangladesh, if I understood your question correctly, how Chittagong Hill Tracts experience is helping us beyond Bangladesh to understand the Highland Asia. I think actually Chittagong Hill Tracts is not exceptional place. It actually shows how state making process and border making process and the categorization making process actually impact people's lives. And we have seen that in my research also, I have written about it, that there are many similar experiences just in this highland area, that plain land has been have given focus for all the state making. So and also facilities, and the mainland people are considered as majority, whether these peripheral area were marginalized and their knowledge was marginalized in the discourse, and also their experiences got marginalized. So I think that is the main learning or takeaway we can take from Chittagong Hill Tract's experience. And role of capitalism. I actually wanted, so if we look at Bangladesh now, there is also this new situation has arrived because of this Rohingya influx in Bangladesh, and the conflict that is going on in neighboring Myanmar. So in general, actually, what I have understood that this whole region was stateless, borderless previously, but these people of this region is still continuing with the process that has started, and people are still actually not sure where they belong, and they evacuated very by the state and the decision makers promptly. And this is what I think is one of the learning that I have got. Capitalism, I think, I don't know whether I should say it capitalism, but what I have learned from Chittagong Hill Tracts is the border militarization that is actually getting more emphasized. So the worldwide now capitalism has also got a new shape, that war is actually dominating the market, or the so in these border areas, there are more purchasing going on, or the victim of capitalism, if you can say, that there are border militarization is getting more emphasized, if I say, and this is also impacting the people's life. It is not, yeah.
Thank you, candidate. Apologize again, dear opponent, but we have another 4 minutes left. So I would like to continue and to give the floor to Professor Stelen, Professor Anthropology at our university. The floor is yours.
Thank you. On the authority of the rector and by virtue of my rights, dear candidate, because I feel this clicking away over the time, I'm not going to repeat all the beautiful words that it said about your thesis. I agree fully with them. And I'm at the end also because I'm more familiar with Indonesia. You refer a couple of times to Indonesia in your thesis, and I think that's correct, because I think what I read in your thesis, I see the transmigration projects in Indonesia where people are brought to the remote areas, as we call them, also with what is the task to civilize these parts of, and it's part of Indonesianisasi, as we call it. What I really like is that I think what you contribute is also makes it possible to have more discussion about what I saw already today about minorities, indigenous people. In Indonesia, we talk about adat communities, pendatang. Pendatang means newcomers. It's not semantic. There's more. So I think I'm bringing these together. Using your material, using our experience in Indonesia, will bring us further in understanding the processes and so on. So this is for the future. I want to go back to your fieldwork, because that's what anthropologists do. One of the things that you bring in is the tension and how governments are working with migration, creating all kinds of problems, bringing people and with framing migrants in specific ways. And in your chapter 4, you don't have to look it up, it's at PhD PDF page 115, you're going to this place where you say that organizations at some moments will help to overcome or to prevent conflict, and that's where you quote Abu Issa. So now you're come back to the field again, and he tells you that it's sometimes better to convince indigenous people that you're not, belonging to the military, but he's military trained. So there's a kind of shift in role. How does it work on the field? How do people deal with all this tension that's put there because of the history and the... Can you say something more about it?
Thank you, learned opponent. This is a very wonderful question. It takes me back to the Chittagong Hill Tracks. And this is also, I was wondering that how, when I was actually did not go to the field, but preparing myself, I was really afraid to go there, that I will be victim of this military people and probably I will be picked up and be tortured and for doing this research, and probably I have to seek permission to do the research. But I think it is doing ethnography that helped me, that I lived there, I just stayed there. So in the beginning, we had explorative field work, or when we were doing this, writing the proposal and trying to find out where should I do my field work. And then I have selected one place where the settlers are more, villages are more. Then I think I am lucky, like other anthropologists all the time. The serendipity we always use, that we are probably is lucky anthropologist. So the trick was that I have been there, and what I have seen, for example, where the house where I was living, it was in the indigenous people's area. There was a market where I usually go in the evening or in the morning, but there were also this army post. So they were also making comments, but the indigenous people were also making comments. In a joking way, it is not totally harmonious. These comments were also racist. So it was going on simultaneously. So even, for example, when I went to a tea stall, so this tension was there, that these are the people who attacked us. Probably we don't know, the names are same, but we haven't seen them. But at the same time, they're having tea and saying that send your children to our home because I have a jackfruit already in my. So these other things actually were going on. I think so how it worked, I think what I have understood from this research, that and Abu Issa, what he was saying, that it is actually people try to make peace or living together. Now that my defense has ended, I sincerely thank the opponents for the attention they have devoted to my thesis. I now look forward to the decision of the doctoral examination committee in the Faculty of Social Science.
I hereby adjourn the public meeting of the Doctoral Examination Committee of the Faculty of Social Sciences for further deliberations.
This way, take a sip and then we can rent.
Please be seated. I reopen the public session. By duly accorded authority, the doctoral examination committee of the Faculty of Social Sciences grants the degree of doctor to Nasrin Siraj. Professor Wal, appointed by the College of Deans as the supervisor, will perform the investiture. I invite both supervisors to place their signature to the degree certificate as witness of this deed. Dit moet je voorlezen. Ja. Oh ja, staan. Sorry.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the statute of Vrije Universiteit and as supervisor appointed thereto by the College of Deans, I hereby confer on you, Dr. Nasrin Siraj, NE, the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, together with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto appertaining. In witness thereof, the seal of the university and signatures of the rector and the supervisors have been affixed to the diploma you are about to receive. Dear Dr. Nasrin Siraj, dear Annie. It is with great honor, pleasure, and frankly a tiny bit of relief that I am standing here on this wonderful day to speak to you as your promoter and supervisor, and to be the first one to congratulate you on this excellent accomplishment. If all good things take time to ripe, Nasrin's dissertation fulfills at least one condition. It took time. With these words, Nasrin, Ton and I began our written assessment of your work that we need to submit in the famous Ora Finita. Throughout the 12 years or so that we worked together on this project, you proved a brilliant ethnographer, greedy pupil, eager reader, critical thinker, daring researcher, engaged scholar, and a slow writer. Going through my inbox, one of the oldest mails I kept, dates from 2012, says, Thanks for Shendel article. Every new article is opening a new door for me. I'm just happy to read all the material, but yet not able to write. Hope you will understand. 1 year later. Hi Ellen, here's the time plan. Writing is not coming. Sad face. Many similar emails followed. Writing is a craft, Nasrin, and it would help if we could write in our mother tongue. Or in the language we get trained in during our school days. But such was not the case for you. Writing is also analyzing, hence it would be so much easier if the world was less messy, baffling, complicated, but it is not. On the 4th of August 2013, you wrote, Have you seen the news on the recent attack on Pahari villages in Matidanga? It happened the day before yesterday. Last month, there were some kidnappings of staff of a mobile phone company. Also, there are some gunfights between JSS and UPDF. In fact, the whole country is in turmoil because of the upcoming elections. All this actually is making my head overloaded and spin. So I think it would be better if I just think about my chapters and proceed according to that. You somehow managed to find focus, and the writing did come, slowly but steadily, and sometimes only after the occasional kick in the butt. Or is this too undoctorly to say? Don and I continued our assessment with the following words. All in all, we as supervisors believe that the process has come to maturity and balance. We believe that the concluding stage of writing did result in a convincing demonstration of coherence, conceptual breadth and consistency. Dear Dr. Siraj, your work makes a crucial and much needed contribution to Bangladesh studies, in particularly to the scholarship on state making, community formation and interethnic relations. You deconstruct different hegemonic perspectives on ethnic conflict in the country, for example, between Bengali perpetrators and indigenous minorities, autochthonous citizens and unwanted intruders, natives and immigrants. Topics altogether not strange to us here in the Netherlands, or other countries for that matter. You give voice to the otherwise unheard, unravel the complexities of seemingly simple dichotomies, and demonstrate, to put in very simple terms, how in an illiberal state like Bangladesh, powerful elites have free rein to use ordinary citizens in their relentless quest for power and dominance over land, natural resources, and people. And I also Your work has also shown, Nasrin, that you are a remarkably gifted field worker. You have the ability to level with people that I have barely come across. You have the gift to establish friendships with people from all sections of society, perhaps better than with your own kind in your own circle and social class. Before I end, a special thanks to Professor Ainu Nahar, who made it possible to make a start with this PhD as part of her university, and to Ton Salman. Well, Ton, you stood by me and by Nasrin, and you made us to the end. Thanks so much for that. Many of those present here today may not realize how, with this work, you have put yourself in a very vulnerable position, both as academic and as activist. By refusing the black and white categorizations, protagonists of either side, Bengali nationalist or indigenous activist, may consider you a traitor to the good cause. Yet, I do not think this will hinder you in any way to speak out. I cannot imagine that the 12 years of close collaboration involving numerous small and big adventures in the form of unexpected encounters and field trips to so-called out-of-the-way places will come to an end today. What does come to an end is your PhD trajectory. You must be very, very proud of yourself. Once more, I congratulate, also on behalf of the other supervisor, Ton Salman, you and your parents, who unfortunately cannot be with us today. I hope they're watching. Congratulations.
To the congratulations of the supervisor, I gladly add the congratulations of the Council of Deans of this university. This doctoral examination ceremony is now completed. Dr. Nasrin Siraj is invited to lead the procession out of this hall, and I invite you all to follow. By pronouncing the doxology, I would like to close this public session of the Doctoral Examination Committee of the Faculty of Social Sciences. Please stand up. The name of the Lord be praised to all eternity.
probably we are done.